Hello, hello. My name is Linda, also known as Tortajala around the internet. I love creative journaling and all things stationery. And today I want to share with you my simple process of making a traveler's notebook from scratch. Now, I've been a long time fan of Midori Traveler's Notebooks, and I do have the official covers made by Traveler's Company here. I love them. I enjoy the feel of the leather, but they are an investment. Currently, here in Europe, it's about €60 for a standard size cover, and that's the regular colors, not any of the limited edition ones. Now, you can buy an off brand one, like this olive one I got from AliExpress, but the prices have been rising, and it would still be around like €30. And I just want to hold out for a future release if a limited edition or official design comes out that I really want. However, I was organizing all of my traveler's notebook inserts recently, and I realized that I had more inserts than would comfortably fit in all of my covers. So, of course, you can use an insert without a cover. It's certainly not necessary, but it's definitely nicer when your inserts have a home. They would be better protected, and it just looks nicer and neater on the shelf. I have a Happy Mail insert where I document my stationery mail, and I'm not ready to archive my 2024 insert, even though it is super chunky. I started a new one for 2025, and so I just want to keep them together. And immediately I found myself wanting to buy a new standard size traveler's notebook cover to put these in. A perfect excuse to go stationery shopping, right? But if you watched my previous video about stationery purchasing regrets, I had to stop myself and not do any impulse buying and really take a look at my stash and things that I already have to see if I could make it work somehow. I mostly use my traveler's notebooks around the house and at my desk, so really it doesn't go out except for one of them. So I thought, instead of buying a new cover when there isn't really a specific one that I want right now, I should wait when is an actual new release that I really, really want and it really piques my interest. So, what to do now? I decided to go back to my early days of DIY projects before I ever even bought an official Traveler's Company notebook cover. Many years ago, I made my own journals and I also made faux dories. That's what they were called back in the day. Faux because they were, quote unquote fake, and dories meaning they are like fake Midori covers. And this is because back in the day, Traveler's Company was still called Midori. Now, I know that making your own version, it might seem a little sad because you can't buy like the official one, or you might feel lacking in some way. But we all don't have the budget to buy the official covers. And of course, there are other options and other independent makers out there, so you can definitely take a look around. But going the DIY route actually has advantages. The official traveler's notebook covers, they only come in two sizes: the standard regular size and the smaller passport size. So, if you're someone that wants a completely different size to use with your particular notebook, like pocket notebooks, you would have to go to an independent maker or go the DIY route. You can make your own. That way, you can customize it to exactly the size that you need. Another advantage is to be able to choose the material of your cover. Traditionally, traveler's notebooks are made with leather, so it's long lasting, and we all love that patina that develops over time with use. But you might prefer a vegan version, or using fabric, or another type of material you might already have in your craft stash. The only important thing to consider is to choose a material that is strong enough to be a cover material and will protect the inserts that you have inside. So, the first thing to do when making your own traveler's notebook is just to decide what type of material you will use for your cover. Take a look at your craft stash or even secondhand stores and consider upcycling something you already have. Maybe an old leather jacket can become a traveler's notebook, or maybe you would rather just sew together a lot of fabric and make that your cover material. I happen to have this scrap piece of black leather in my craft stash. It's not very thick, so certainly it's not going to be the same thing as a Traveler's Company leather notebook, but you can buy leather online or at your local craft store if that's something you are searching for because you want to find something that is thick, just like the Traveler's Company notebooks. But I'm going to use what I have and work with this black piece of leather. The supplies you need are basically elastic bands for the closure and the center binding area, something to cut your leather or whatever your cover material might be, the material you're using for your cover, and probably some tools like a needle or something that can punch holes in your cover material. Simple tools like that, and that's really all that you need. I already have elastic bands in my stash, but you can definitely find them in any kind of craft store or even buy them online. The only thing to note is to think about how thick you want your elastic. I've made the mistake before of buying elastic that is too thick, and sometimes it's too thin, so you sort of have to take a look at the millimeters and decide which one is right for you. Some people have also used giant rubber bands, so you can definitely get crafty and innovative. Just use what you have at hand. So I'm using an existing traveler's notebook in the standard size as a template. I'm just tracing the shape over my black piece of leather with a pencil so that I have the marks to go by. Ultimately, a traveler's notebook is just a piece of material cut to size with elastic bands added inside to allow for adding inserts and for its closure. Now, of course, there are details that could require more work to make it even more customized, like if you wanted to add pockets, if you wanted to add grommets in the holes for more long lasting and just round the corners and other such details. But I'm just gonna go simple and use what I have. Again, going back to the true DIY fashion of just making do with whatever's around me as opposed to having to go out and buy more supplies. Now, Traveler's Notebooks inserts, the regular size, they are 21 centimeters tall. So you can also just measure things out uh, instead of using any other kind of template. If you like a cover that is very flush to your inserts, then you're going to want to get very close to the size of your insert, but you can also give more space on the top and bottom if you want extra room. For the width, you definitely want to consider how many inserts you're going to put in your traveler's notebook and how chunky they get. Just how much room do you want before uh, it fills up your entire traveler's notebook cover. So if you think you want to put a lot of inserts or your inserts are going to get very filled up, then you might want to make a traveler's notebook that is wider than usual to accommodate that situation. I think I'm going to be just a little bit generous in making it slightly wider than the Traveler's Company one, but not too much because I do like things to be a closer fit. And if it's just like a little chunky, that's fine. I'm using a utility knife to cut my piece of leather to size and, scissors to trim off smaller details. And the black leather that I have is quite thin. It's not really holding up by itself, like it's very floppy. So if you have a material that doesn't keep its shape well, it might not really work well as a cover because it could get like folded and misshapen really easily. Um, but since I have this leather material and I wanted to use it, I thought I could make it stronger by using two layers. So for the size of material that I have, instead of trimming the left and right sides perfectly to the standard size, I'm actually going to fold over the leather onto itself just for the left and right size so that there's two layers of leather for the front and back cover. So that will basically give me like the more sturdy, substantial, thicker material that would make a good cover in this situation. Now, if you're using fabric, for example, some people will sew like multiple layers of fabric to make it stronger, or you can even use fabric to wrap around a cardboard skeleton to create your cover. It just gives it more structure. So I used to make sketchbooks using leather like this, and I would actually line the inside with cardstock or watercolor paper to give it like that sturdy framework. Now, if I had the skills and the tools, maybe I could cut the leather into pieces and sew everything together to make like pockets and such, but I don't have any leather tools at all. I don't know even how to like finish the edges or to round the edges. Just don't have the tools and obviously don't have the skills. So I am going like very DIY here. I did contemplate trying to sew this all together, but I was just too lazy to set up my old sewing machine that's like tucked away in the closet right now. And I don't actually have a sewing machine or like foot that is for leather. So if you sew with a machine, you're going to run the risk of making marks like all over your leather and it's not going to look very nice. It's not the same as sewing by hand, obviously. Um, so I decided let's not try to do too much here without knowing what would happen. Let's just go old school and do what I can with what I have, which really means to go as simply as possible. So basically, I have cut my piece of leather to the height that I want, and then I am sort of using my standard size 1 as a guide, but I'm going to cut off the excess on the left and right just enough so it doesn't overlap in the middle of my cover. I don't want like 3 or 4 layers. I just want the double layer up effect for the left and the right. So this folded leather technique, if you can call it that, it makes it look like there are pockets on the inside of the cover, but really it's just the leather glued onto itself. And again, because this is pretty thin leather, I think it's like 1 millimeter, I think. It really does need to be double layered up to be more substantial and hold up as a cover for me. So, the way that I get crafty and do these DIY projects, I really just eyeball most things. I might make some marks or try to measure out to be exact as possible, but I just go with the flow and I know I'm not going to get like a super pristine, perfect result, but it's just a lot more fun this way and easier and just low pressure. So as I go through this process, I am just sort of like eyeballing, trying to make sure, like, okay, will this work out? And how much excess I should cut off so that it will work out for this cover material. I already noticed that, like, I've cut maybe the top and bottom a little crooked. So I know that when I fold it over, some parts might not match up, but you can always trim off more after the fact. Uh, you don't want to trim too much beforehand because obviously you can't add more material. It's easier to keep like taking off material if it's like too big. So, my thought is to be as exact as I can, but it's okay if I need to, keep trimming off some material on the top and the bottom if I think that the cover is too big for what I want. And as I go through this process, again, I'm just eyeballing, just trying to make sure that it will be, as good as it gets for me. And I'm also going to test some of my inserts that I want to put in this traveler's notebook to see if it's wide enough, if it'll work out because my inserts are very chunky. And that is the one from 2024. And then I started a new one for 2025. So there'll be two inserts in this traveler's notebook. And obviously, if you don't already have a traveler's notebook cover, you're not going to have like that template to rely on. But of course, you can take measurements. And also, if you already have an inserts or a notebook that you want to use, you can wrap that around it. To see if it will work out and if you prefer the way that it fits your notebooks or inserts. Of course, you can be super precise. You can work out your measurements beforehand. You can write out like a rough draft, plan everything out. You can even cut out a template with paper before actually cutting out your final material because if you only have like one piece of leather or something, you don't want to mess it up and cut it, incorrectly. Um, some people do measure everything out to the T and really take their time with the marking and stuff like that before cutting. So, of course, do what makes sense for your situation. It just depends on how precise you want to be, what is, important for you in terms of all the details. But again, I am pretty, you know, of course, I want my things to be as precise as possible, but I'm also very forgiving in DIY projects, so I'm not too crazy about it. But jumping forward, after trimming my leather material, I'm just making the final comparisons with my existing traveler's notebook cover to see if it's good to go, even though I know that, there are imperfections, the cut might be a little crooked, and I'm gonna have to trim and fix things after the fact, but that's okay. It's big enough and it's not too off. So I think that uh, it's okay to move ahead to the next step. And in my case, the next step is still preparing the cover material because I need to go ahead and glue the left and right sides over itself, fold it over, and give it time to dry before I actually move forward. And again, I contemplated sewing and then I tried to find some liquid glue, but I could not in the entire house. So I am just using a glue stick here. Again, use what you have, right? I'm using a giant glue stick, spreading a lot of the glue on either side of the leather pieces and really like saturating everything and making sure I've got glue everywhere. Uh, and just using that for my leather. And I'm going to fold it over, and basically, that's how I'm attaching the leather to itself. I'm sure th- like leather glue or something like that exists, but again, I'm just using what I have. And I think because this leather, like obviously it's a natural material on the inside it's sort of like rough, so I think it'll work fine with the glue, just regular any kind of glue. So I definitely need to give this time to dry and cure before moving forward and doing anything else because I don't want like the flaps to come undone or move around while I'm trying to like finish the traveler's notebook cover. So really I just need to do like a final measurement check and just like glue everything down and then wait before I move on to the next step. So what I'm going to do is actually put a bunch of heavy books on top of this glued piece and leave it overnight to dry. Okay, so I'm back the next morning, took all the books off, and this is what I have now. After the glue has dried, the leather is actually pretty stiff. So if you don't like that, it could be a problem using this method. But for me, it's definitely made it like a more sturdy, strong cover. And I do have those unfinished edges, and I will have to trim things, but I'll definitely do that after the fact. But I do realize it does look really rough now. But I'm going to dig into my little stash of elastics and see if I can find something that I want to use. I do have elastics from the official Travelers Company repair kit, but also I have a bunch of elastics from Paper Republic, another company that makes Travelers notebooks. And you can, of course, buy elastics online at your local craft shop, probably like by the meter as well. And there are a variety of colors and also thicknesses. So definitely pay attention to like how thick or thin you want it to be. Like I don't know the exact millimeter measurements, but it's something in the middle because I've definitely used too thin elastic before and it stretches out really easily. And then I've used too thick elastic that is really hard to string through and sort of takes up too much space in the traveler's notebook. So it really like will indent into your paper and your cover and all that kind of stuff. So the sort of orangey red color is really bold and gives a good contrast to the black leather. So I do like it, but it almost looks like a warning to me or something like the red color. So in the end, I just decided to use the dark green elastic. I like that a lot more. I guess greens are really coming into play in all of my stationery things as of late. So that's something that I'm going to use. And so just to let you know, for the binding area, For your elastic closure, you're obviously going to need 2 times the width of your traveler's notebook size, and obviously a little bit extra to tie the knot. And for the actual elastic inside the traveler's notebook, you're going to need 2 times the height of the traveler's notebook, but if you want to string the elastic through more times to get more elastics inside, then you're going to need it more, a longer length, right? So you do want to think about that beforehand and just take some measurements and obviously give yourself a little bit more elastic, because it's definitely better to have more than to have less. So again, I am sort of eyeballing things again, just to make sure that the elastic like will be enough. And I already had one that was tied that would be perfect for the closure, so no issues there. And right now, what I'm gonna do is actually punch the holes. And this is sort of important in the sense that um, my traveler's notebook cover is a little bit like off-centered. So when you punch the holes, that's going to be like the final position of where your elastics are and everything. So you do want to make sure it is more or less how you want it to be, and you're not like punching the holes, off center or in the wrong, position. So what I'm going to do now is just do like a little bit of trimming of the cover just so that it doesn't seem so wonky, because there are parts that are, just completely off. And I'm just using a utility knife again and trying to like measure it and flatten it out. And one thing I did was I decided to trim it while it was closed, because then I could see like how things overlapped. But I ended up just still making an error in my trimming, because then it was like a little crooked. So it means that the inside was a little taller and the outside edge is a little shorter. So again, all user error that not everyone is going to make. It's just that I can never cut straight. I don't know why. I can't even trim paper straight. So, um, you know, usually leather makers, they're probably not cutting this by hand. If they're creating traveler's notebooks in a particular sizes, they're probably using like a metal stamp cutter that cuts every piece to like the exact size and shape. Or now they have like digital cutters, so it's like a laser that, makes the exact shape that you need. So of course, doing things by hand with like regular household tools, it's not going to be exact. But, it probably also depends on your skill. So I'm just going to try and do the best that I can with what I have. I know it's not going to be perfect and it's not going to be, you know, the best, most finished product, but I have a feeling that over time and use, when this covers over all of the inserts, it will sort of mold to the shape of the inserts, and the edges will probably look better with use as well as they get, worn down kind of thing. So yeah, I'm just gonna do the best with what I can do now, and it will have to do. Now that my cover is cut to size and ready to go, all I have to do to finish this off is to punch the holes where I will be stringing through the elastics and string through the elastics. So I'm using an old craft catalog just to protect my desk as I make like hole punches and things. And now, if you notice, the Traveler's Company notebooks, they actually punch a hole through the back cover to string through the closure elastic. But you'll notice that a lot of other brands and independent makers, they will actually punch through the center binding area for the closure elastic. So that is a personal decision that you'll have to make what you prefer, because having the knot at the back cover means that it's like a little bump when you use your notebooks. But having the knot in the binding means that you have the elastic knot there that might be pushing up against your inserts as well, because it does take space. Um, and it could misshape like the center binding of some of your inserts as well. It just sort of depends how the fit is. So I don't think there's a perfect solution. It really just depends on what you prefer. I'm going to try putting everything in the binding this time just to try something different from the Traveler's Company style. And I'm also using an awl to poke the holes. It's basically a bookbinding tool that is like a sharp metal point that allows you to like poke holes through, normally it would be paper, but in this case, one, layer of leather. You can, of course, use a hole puncher, but the problem is that the hole puncher does make a very large hole, so that might not be very pretty, or aesthetically pleasing. And um, you can also take your cover outside and use a hammer and nail to make holes. There's a lot of innovative ways to be able to make a hole so that you can string your elastic through. And it seems like the elastic I have is pretty thick. So I did try using a needle to help me string it through. That would make it a lot easier, but I could not get the elastic to fit in through the eye of the needle because it's so thick. So I ended up having just to do it by hand, and I sort of used like the awl to like push it through the hole, and also if you have tweezers to help pull it through and just somehow get the elastic into the holes, and in the end tie a knot. Now, you'll notice also that the Traveler's Company official notebooks, they actually have a metal part on the outside binding top part. That's what actually holds the knot. So if you're not using that, you probably would tie the knot on the inside, like some of the independent makers do. So again, you're going to have a lot of like knots inside, and it's again a personal preference of if it's something that bothers you or not. This is also why it's important to get elastic that's not too thick, because the thicker the elastic, the more big the knot is. So it could indent your papers and stuff. Um, some people do tie a knot on the outside, especially if you think you're going to use that end of the knot to maybe add some charms or beads or decorations. So you can sort of work it into your design where the knot ends up to actually be decorative, and then it will look a little bit more finished as well. So again, depends on what tools you have in hand, what design you have in mind, and what you prefer. Now, this process here is probably the hardest part because it's just not easy to like string through elastics if you don't have it like on a needle, and you do need a little bit of patience. But you just got to keep at it. It will, work if you, use the tools that you have, a pen, tweezers, something like that. But basically, after you string through all your elastics and tie your knots, your traveler's notebook is done. Since I doubled up my elastics on the inside, I can actually put both of my inserts in without adding any extra rubber bands or connecting elastics. And so this is my finished DIY traveler's notebook. I'm going to stick in these inserts that I have that I planned to put in this particular traveler's notebook. Pretty cool, huh? Like we just went through the process of creating our own traveler's notebook cover. Now, I know what you're thinking. My DIY traveler's notebook cover is obviously very rough, not super tidy. It doesn't have any, cool finished edges or anything. But it is leather, it is sturdy, and it works perfectly fine with the inserts inside. And it looks pretty cool. I think I might have to tighten my elastics maybe on the inside a bit because it does seem a little loose. So that is a personal preference on how tight you want to make your elastics after putting in your inserts and like testing things out. So those are all the details that you can sort of work with for your personal traveler's notebook. So DIY traveler's notebook complete. Here it is. I wanted to show you what I've created and the two inserts that I put inside, and you can see that, it works perfectly fine. And certainly, if you look at the details, you'll notice, but on first glance, you probably wouldn't know that it was necessarily just a DIY piece of leather. So here I wanted to show you the Traveler's Company Camel standard sized Traveler's Notebook next to my DIY version, Handmade. And of course you can see mine, the edges are rough on the top and bottom and the corners. But the folded over leather on the left and right side, I think it's actually pretty cool. And compared to the rough edge of the Traveler's Company version, I think it's actually nicer and probably holds up better to the elastic closure. We'll see what happens over time. And checking on the inside, I can feel that my specific cover is definitely more stiff because of the gluing of the leather that I've done. Over on itself. It's not as like soft and pliable as just one piece of thicker leather like the Traveler's Company version. So of course there are definitely quality differences and finishing differences, but really I don't think it's too shabby. Obviously there are also differences in the binding since I put the closure in the center instead of the back cover, and I don't have like that little metal piece. So I do have more knots on the inside of my traveler's notebook cover. But I think some people might prefer that because some people don't like the metal piece that's on the outside of the traveler's notebook, because it sort of like knocks onto your desk and might, scratch up the surface and things like that, and also makes noise. So again, these differences, it makes it so that a DIY version might actually be better for you because you can customize it exactly how you would like it. And again, I was testing this out with my inserts and just sort of inspecting and seeing how it works, as I open and close and like would use the inserts. I think I might have to adjust the elastics, and it might just be because the leather is very thin. So obviously the elastic is going to pull on the leather a lot more and sort of like make it indent. So that really just depends on the materials you have and what you've used for your traveler's notebook cover. But all things considered, I mean, I think it's pretty good. So I am happy that I've made something from the materials that I have in my stash right now, and my inserts have a home now, and that is a cool thing. And I think it's just actually pretty fun to have like a DIY version of the Traveler's Notebook because I sort of feel a little bit more freedom with this one. Maybe in altering it even more, adding patches and decorating it somehow. It's not as precious because, I just made it with a scrap piece of leather, which I know is very funny, because, when something is less expensive or whatever, you just happen to use it more than maybe something you treasure a bit more and you don't want to like mess it up. So, sort of funny in that respect, but I think you know what I mean. So, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments. How do you like my traveler's notebook compared to the official one? Do you like the DIY aspect? Let me know what you think down in the comments. I would definitely appreciate your opinions and thoughts. And if you have any tips or tricks on how I could improve it, or maybe like add details to finish it a little better, especially the edges and the corners. So I wish you a very lovely day, and I thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye.